Thank you for being here. My name is April Amundson. I don't see anybody at the door, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am the Policy and Rules Manager for Leave and Care programs. Those include paid family and medical leave, which is what I'm here to talk about today, and then the WA Cares Fund program, ESD's responsibility to that program. So a little bit about paid family and medical leave. It is a law that passed in 2017 that we had until 2019 to start collecting premiums for. So we had about a year and a half after the law passed to start collecting premiums from employers. 2020, we started paying benefits, and we had a big boom of people who had babies in 2019 that applied for the benefit in 2020. And we'll be talking about that today. I wanted to go ahead and introduce my counterpart here. I can talk about law and policy all day long, but when it comes to operations and systems, Larry's here to help me out. So, Larry, do you want to introduce yourself?
So my name is Larry Cantrell. I'm one of the supervisors for one of the benefits teams at Paid Family and Medical Leave. And I started with Paid Family and Medical Leave in 2019 after having been at UI for about a year. And so I've been with the program since they went live with benefits, and we'll work up to that. Worked in all the positions, started out as a benefits specialist, and then going up to compliance, and working on the auditing team up there for the employer auditing, and then back down to in 2021 to the as a supervisor for one of the benefits teams. So I'll turn it over to April.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, for helping answering any benefit questions for operations and systems, so thank you for that. Just a little bit information about paid family and medical leave in general. Washington State was the 5th in the nation to pass a paid family and medical leave law. You heard Cammie talk about it a little bit yesterday. We were the first in the nation to pass a law that implemented both family and medical leave at the same time. States like California and New York put their family leave benefit on top of a medical leave program, so they already had something in place. Washington was the first in the nation to put both out. As of January this year, there are 13 states that have paid family and medical leave programs. So in the last 4 years, we've gotten quite a few more states that joined and either are implementing or have recently passed laws to have a paid family and medical leave program. That includes Hawaii, who just has a medical leave, and then Puerto Rico, who also has just medical leave. But the things that we'll cover today, we're going to talk about paid family and medical leave, what it is. We're going to talk about the benefit and the premium, who pays for it. It's a little bit different from UI. We're going to talk about job protection, and we're going to talk about applying for the benefit, and then also where to learn more. So, lots to cover today. I do appreciate an interaction. I don't necessarily like talking at people, so if you have questions throughout the presentation, I'm more than happy to have questions as we go along. Okay. So what is paid family and medical leave? Paid family and medical leave is a program that workers pay into in Washington that they can use when they need time to take care of themselves for medical reasons, or to take care of family members for medical reasons. It's also for bonding. So if you have a new child in the home, either through birth, adoption, or placement, you can bond with that child. And for the most part, I'm gonna speak to the program generally, but you apply through the state for the benefit. There are employers out there. We have about 300 employers that have voluntary plans, and you will know that. We have that available on our website, and your employer should notify you. You apply directly through the state, not your employer. And then it's also paid directly to you, not your employer. We also have job protection with this, and I'll be talking about, and that your employer cannot prevent you. There's laws that protect you from being able to take this benefit should you need it. So it's like FMLA, it's a protected right that you have in Washington State. One of the things that I'd probably like to call out, and I'll talk about it a little bit later too, is that paid family medical leave in Washington is for primarily workers in Washington, but we cannot compel the federal government to pay premiums to us for federal workers. So it's for folks who are not federal workers. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But let's see. All right, let's talk about family leave for a little bit. And I don't know why I'm so nervous. I don't know if it's because it's the end of the day. I do these all the time, but for some reason I'm a little nervous today. Maybe it's the recording. But family leave is for bonding with children for the first year after their birth or placement. We have several definitions of under what placement is. We recently changed that this year to allow people who recently adopted to include that, because the law states when the child was first placed in the home. So if you brought in a child through adoption or like foster care, it might exhaust that time. You have a year from that time frame to be able to exhaust the benefit. And so we changed some of our laws recently to account for folks who didn't take it at the time of placement and who wanted to take it at adoption. It's for caring for a family member with a serious health condition. And I'll talk about the definition of family member here in a minute. But if you have a family member that's experiencing a serious health condition, you can go ahead and apply for the benefit so you can take leave to take care of that family member. And then we also have military-related exigencies. Under FMLA allows job-protected leave for people who are experiencing a foreign deployment with their military spouse or parent or something of that nature. So military family leave allows folks to take up to 12 weeks of leave during their claim year to spend time with a family member or to do things like legal services or child care issues that's related to a spouse who's on, or a family member that's on foreign deployment. So
what are the years, is it for a whole year after you have your first child?
Mm-hmm.
And the others are shorter?
No, so we'll talk about that in a minute, but thank you. So his question was, is for a year after you've had birth. There are little different timings for entitlement.
Thanks, I'll wait.
Expiration. For bonding, you have a year from the time that the child was first placed in your home, whether through birth or placement or adoption now. So you have a year from that time frame to go ahead and take the leave. For others, you have, for like medical leave, those kinds of things, you're gonna tell us a time frame that you need for leave, and then you have a year from the time you first start your claim to take any leave that you need that's in your entitlement. So a little bit different. If you wait 6 months after your child is born, you'll only have 6 months to take bonding leave, right? So, but we'll talk about more of that in a minute. All right, so recently we had law changes around the definition of family member. We're aligned with FMLA pretty closely, except for they don't account for grandchild, they don't account for siblings, and they don't account for grandparents, right? So some of the new laws that changed, we added things like folks who have family members in the home, like aunt, significant other partners that you might not be married to, people that you might have as a family member that isn't traditionally a family member in the home. So when we're talking about caring for a family member, we're talking about this right here. I had a question earlier about bonding. Bonding is between a parent and a child. That's very specific. But when you're talking about caring for a family member, that's this right here. So, yep, Ish.
So, I just want to make sure I understand this. Thank you, April. So this definition here is specific to the PFML only, not to other state benefit programs.
That's a good question. I know that there are other state programs that are looking at our definition of family member to adopt the changes too, but those might not have happened yet. I know that they're looking at that. Other states who are implementing paid family medical leave programs are also looking at our laws. We actually stole it from the Build Better Act. So And one of the things that I didn't talk about in my opening was that the feds are also looking at, we have federal delegation every year that have a proposed bill to look at a nationwide program. So we actually stole this part from the Build Better Act. So,
Thank you.
and it's much more generous than FMLA,
It is.
but
That last bullet there is the one that really extended.
Yeah.
Significant.
but to what more modern day family members look like, right? So you can take care of an aunt. Maybe you had in loco parentis, somebody who you considered a mother as you were growing up that might not be a biological or
Yeah.
foster or legally placed mom. You can take care of them because you consider them family.
Yeah. Or a nephew or niece that you are the primary
Right,
person that.
right. So, any questions about definition of family member? All right. Medical leave. Medical leave is specifically time for you to take time for you when you have a serious health condition. Serious health condition is defined in the law. It's not meant for colds or flus, those like short-term ailments that you might have. But what it is for things like cancer treatment, dialysis, serious chronic health conditions. If you have a cold that is exacerbated by an existing condition, those kinds of things are allowable under serious health condition. You do need a serious health condition form or a health certification to prove to us that you have a serious health condition signed by a medical provider, which is also defined in the law. You need that when you do that to take care of your family member as well. So you'll need documentation to show that you need that time off to take care of your family member or yourself. We also allow for, I'll get to you. We also allow for intermittent leave, right? So if you need at least 8 hours in a week to take time off, we will allow for that. And you'll have to report any hours earned from your employment, any PTO that you might have received, but you are allowed to take intermittent leave and pay family medical leave at the same time.
So my question is, can a woman who's had a baby, can she do 6 weeks of postnatal leave and medical leave, and then also the family?
Yes.
Okay, so they can. Right.
Yeah, so we'll get to the entitlement in a moment, but one of our recent law changes is also the legislature saw fit to allow the first 6 weeks after birth for a parent to take while they're recovering from birthing a child. So the first 6 weeks after birth is considered postnatal medical leave. And they don't necessarily need a med cert, they just need to show proof that they had a baby. And they'll get that first 6 weeks of medical leave. Good question. All right. So I said that serious health condition was defined. It's probably one of our longest definitions in our statute. It generally includes any serious illness, injury, chronic condition, and some substance use. Your medical provider has to certify it. You have to have at least need more than 2 or 3 days of inpatient or some type of treatment in order to be able to be considered a health condition, serious health condition. And then, like I said earlier, doesn't generally include a common cold, flu, earaches, those kinds of things, allergies. I have allergies.
Who makes this call?
Who makes this call? This is defined by the legislature.
Okay.
So we have a RCW that defines serious health condition for us. And we've defined who medical providers are. And we have an obligation to align with FMLA as much as possible. So we've used the same medical providers that FMLA will, essentially. We're looking at changing some of those this year too.
So thank you, April. So if I'm reading this correctly, I'm thinking about this impacts on workforce side, work source. So a family member who needs time, if somebody takes time off to care for somebody who has like an opioid use disorder. Let's just say that they can apply for PFMLA.
If they're caring for someone and they can get a medical certification for that person,
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
yeah. Larry, is that something that you see? Have you seen those kinds of claims?
Quite a bit. We
Yeah.
get a lot of with family care is what it falls under, and you will see that whether they're taking care of somebody that's got a substance abuse issue with intensive treatment, just freshly discharged from say a facility where they've received some 30 days of intensive care, or where they need supervision for a period of time,
For sure.
or hospice situations as well.
Yeah. So I don't know how many folks were in here for the unemployment insurance piece. Our law was copy-pasted from unemployment insurance in several places. This two-part eligibility is kind of one of them. We look at a qualifying period, the first 4 calendar quarters, to determine eligibility. If you do not make that eligibility requirement, we look at the last 4 completed calendar quarters. You have to have 820 hours in a qualifying period to qualify. On average, that's about 16 hours per week. So you can work very part-time and still be eligible for this program. It's meant to be for folks who don't typically have family leave benefits, like say I would, working for the state. The state is very generous with their program. This is meant for folks who don't typically have those kinds of benefits. It is portable, so as many employers that you work with in Washington are considered reportable to you, and your wages are reported under that. So like if I worked for DSHS in the beginning of the year, and I now work for ESD, when determining my claim, they would look at both my DSHS and ESD employment to determine my eligibility. So, there's a question back here?
So if it's for people that don't have benefits, so if we do work for the state, do we have to exhaust our benefits before?
Not at all.
Okay, so it is for everybody,
It's
not
for-
just for those that don't have.
It's for everybody, but it was really designed to provide benefits to folks who don't typically have them, right?
I just
So,
want to clarify that.
yeah, there's a requirement for the state to save sick leave, where they get 8 hours for every 40, but that's sick leave. Not every employer is obligated to provide vacation or that kind of paid time off that we get as state workers. So you had said something that made me want to say something, but now I don't remember it.
We don't have to exhaust.
Oh, no, so what I was gonna say is that OFM has also allowed us as state workers to use our accrued PTO as supplemental benefits. And I'll talk about what supplemental benefits are in a little bit. So our program is designed to pay up to 90% of wage replacement, not making you 100% of your wages. OFM allows state workers to use their accrued PTO to account for that 10% difference. So.
Better than you are.
What's that?
Better than unemployment insurance.
Right, different reasons,
It
right?
depends on how much you make.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because of that.
and we'll talk about that too. So qualifying events, anything that I talked about in the last few slides are considered a qualifying event. So we have a 2-part eligibility. We have to determine that you are eligible 820 hours in a qualifying period. And then we have to determine that you have an existing event that would qualify you for leave. So. All right, so what do you get? You get, and I'm gonna use this term loosely. You see the asterisk up there, there's an equation that amounts to what your typical work week hours are. But essentially, you get 12 weeks of medical leave or family leave. If you have combined experience in a claim year, you get up to 16 weeks of medical or family leave and family leave. And then if you're pregnancy-related disability, you could be eligible for an additional 2 weeks, totaling up to 18 weeks. So to your question earlier, if I'm pregnant and need 6 weeks of medical leave post-birth, and there were some complications with that, we could potentially add an additional 2 weeks, and then you would have a total of 18 weeks available to you to not just take for your medical leave, but to also bond with your baby. So, any questions about that? The typical work week hours averages, sure, go ahead, averages your total hours throughout the year and divides that by, 52, and that's what your typical work week hours are.
Maybe a rhetorical question or try to be as tactful as possible, but when we say weeks, can you also break that down like into days? In other words, can an employee take like maybe 3 or 4 days off and then go to work for a week or two, then take another 2-3 weeks off?
We do allow for intermittent leave. When I say typical work week hours, if you're a salaried employee, your typical work week hours are 40 hours per week, okay? If you're a half-time worker and say your average hours over the year was 20 hours per week, your typical work week hours would be 20 hours per week. So if you're only taking, if you're needing 2 days off in a week, say 16 hours, that would prorate your benefit depending on how many hours that are available to you in each week. But we had an option. We could have determined that you had like 12 times your typical work week hours, which is significantly less at 20 hours per week than 40 hours a week. But we wanted to make sure that people had 12 weeks to take off. So people are only allowed to use up to their typical work week hours every week when they file a claim. So. All right, we have a claim year. So another thing that's kind of torn from unemployment insurance is a claim year will start the Sunday before the application is submitted, and you have a claim year to use your entitlement of up to 18 weeks, depending on your circumstances, right? If you're on medical leave and you need 4 weeks to recover from a surgery, your medical provider will say that they need 4 weeks, we'll give you 4 weeks. If you need that changed, we'll ask for additional certification, so you can ask for a couple more weeks. But you have up to 12 weeks of medical leave in your bank for that claim year to use. If you've exhausted the 12 weeks, you'll have to wait until your claim year's expired to start a new claim. Particularly for those ones that are chronic conditions or things like that might last multiple years, like cancer treatment or something like that. So, any questions about that? Yes. You can shout it if you have a loud enough voice. Okay.
So does that mean with the time off, let's say you use all 12 weeks, does that throw off the count if you need to do another claim year the next year? Like you don't earn enough hours, or how does that work subsequent, cumulative years, I guess, in a row?
So if you consider, on average, 820 hours is 16 hours per week. That is what you need to do on average to earn the benefit. So if you're gonna be off for 12 weeks at a time, I don't imagine, usually the majority of people, I would say, meet that 820 hour criteria in 2 quarters. So I don't think that people generally worry about not being able to make a new claim should you exhaust your medical leave for the next claim year. Unless you were completely out and you had no work, 16 hours a week is not a huge bar to reach in order to be eligible. There are other states that, have a lower threshold. Oregon, for example, you only needed to have earned $1,000 in the year in order to be eligible, but they also pay in relation to that, so. Good question. So you'll have that claim year to use 12 weeks of medical leave, 12 weeks of family leave, or a combined 16 weeks if you have experiences with both family and medical leave needs. So we also define a week. So your typical work week hours, Sunday through Saturday, is what we determine what you need to file your claim for. We just had to put some parameters around it to determine what would, on a consistent basis with everyone, even though that might not be your typical work week. People have Monday through Sunday, people have Tuesday through Monday, you know. We are looking at Sunday through Saturday when you report your hours or when you file your claim. We'll probably get into this in a little bit, and Larry, you can help me with this if you want. But unlike unemployment insurance, it is retrospective. I think that this is probably one of our most challenging pieces of our program, because if you anticipate that you need leave for 4 weeks because you're having surgery, you should be able to claim for 4 weeks and not have to come back to us. But our law is retrospective. It always looks backwards. So we have to know if you worked during those weeks, if you got any accrued paid time off that you didn't, that you needed to report to prorate your benefit appropriately. So we're always looking backwards, and I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges we have with weekly claims for paid family medical leave. It was designed similarly to unemployment insurance, which works for unemployment insurance, doesn't always work for us.
Can you, like, if you had a medical procedure like 6 months ago and you didn't know about this program, can you file retroactively for it?
We do allow for backdating in certain circumstances. Not knowing about it, say your employer is obligated, I'll talk about some of that in a moment. Your employer is obligated to tell you if you're going to take leave that you need for a significant amount of time. They're supposed to tell you, hey, there's paid family medical leave, you might want to use it, right? So they have an obligation. I think it's like you have an obligation to tell your employer at least 30 days in advance or as soon as practicable that you plan on taking the program. They have an obligation within like 5 or 7 days to tell you that what you're experiencing could qualify for this program. So.
So this being a paid family medical leave program, do you find that it's a barrier that people have to file on a weekly basis?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. There's other states that will just mark the days. You'll mark the days on a calendar in which you're off, and then they'll pay you as those weeks come along. But the way that our RCW is written, it's all retrospective. Like I said, it was similarly created after unemployment insurance. So we're always looking at the week prior. You have up to 4 weeks to claim a week. So if you need to, but that's not good for you monetarily. We want you to claim as soon as possible so you can get the money that you are entitled to. But I think it's a challenge that we see consistently, requiring folks to claim weekly.
Is that something that we are thinking about requesting an amendment to the RCW?
It's something that we're considering, I would say. We built the system to be like current RCW, and as you know, any RCW change will require system changes, and we don't want to make it harder for people. So, go ahead.
You might want to answer this question later. It's the client that we had in the office the other day. He is filed 6 weeks ago and has yet to receive a payment. So I didn't want to wait till the parking lot to bring that up. But if that's out of order, by all means.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay.
And the thing is, there's a lot of fact finding. I think right now we're running about 2.5 weeks on initial claims for approval. But part of the piece that a lot of people miss because they don't necessarily know or understand what the fine print in the program tells them when they're online is that they have to go back in and file those weekly claims once they're approved.
Well, we told him he needed to do that. He just didn't know. He thinks he has been. I'm not sure, but thank you. That probably answers the question.
If he's waiting for a decision,
Yeah.
there might be some things like a medical certification or additional verification that he might be required to provide. That's one thing that could hold up a claim if you didn't provide all your required documentation. The other thing that will hold up a payment is if you don't file your week. So for medical leave, we'll talk about this too. For medical leave, it requires a waiting period just to assure that this is a real medical leave claim. For family leave, caring for a family member requires a waiting period, but all other leaves do not require a waiting period. So the weekly benefit amount is a complicated calculation to determine how much money you will receive in a week. It is dependent on your 2 highest quarters earned in your qualifying period. It's unemployment insurance, right? Sound familiar? And they may receive up to 90% of their average weekly wage, depending on their income. I used to include the calculation up here, but people would glaze over and say, nah. We change our weekly benefit amount annually, like unemployment insurance does, to a, I think our maximum benefit amount right now is $1,045, or is it? 1456. 1456. I'm way off. I'm way 3 years ago. So, okay, yeah, it says right there, 1456. Thank you very much. But if you're interested in finding out about what your weekly benefit would look like, we have a website, and as the gentleman said earlier, these pages will be available once they upload them on the website. So as you can imagine, we are designed to pay up to 90%, but the higher earner you are, 1456 won't look like your weekly pay, right? So the higher earner you are, the less percentage of wage replacement you'll have. But the lower earner you are, the higher wage replacement you'll have. So when will we pay less than your maximum weekly benefit amount? You have to report hours. We'll prorate weeks at times if it's cut off by your claim. If your start date, I don't think this is accurate anymore. I think we changed this. If your leave start date is not on a Sunday, your first and last weeks, didn't we change that?
I don't.
That's an old slide.
They did.
Yeah. So if you're taking intermittent leave, if you're only wanting 8 to 10 hours a week, we'll reduce your benefit amount. Or if you have work or PTO. So. Supplemental benefits. So I talked a little bit earlier about OFM, how they supplement when we take paid family medical leave as a state worker. The state legislature has allowed us to supplement our benefit payments with accrued paid time off. Employers have that option. If they want to make you whole as an employee who might earn up to 90% of your weekly benefit amount or your wages replacement, they can provide additional money to make you whole in your wages. Not every employer offers that, but some do. Go ahead.
So I also work for the state, and could you use, I have like a ton of sick time. So could I use sick time to supplement that wage, or is it just?
Yeah, there's a WAC out there that tells you what leave you can use to supplement your paid family medical leave benefits. I think the only thing that's not on there is if you receive shared leave. So if you're receiving accrued leave from somebody else to help you while you're ill or having to care for a loved one, you can't use that. So, but you can use holidays, you can use your accrued paid time off, any of those kind of leave benefits as a state worker allow that.
And I would say that, can I ask?
Absolutely.
Your HR team will be really good at guiding you through that. As somebody who's had many of my team members go through this program, I do see the documentation that is shared. They really walk our team members through what they can and cannot do in the process.
Thank you.
I will also say there's some state agencies, maybe I won't say that, that might not be so sure. So like I said, there is a WAC out there that allows state workers to use our accrued benefits. So.
Did I understand you correctly that you do have to, if not a state worker, not a county worker,
Sure.
you do have to use your PTO first?
No, not at all.
Oh,
No,
good.
there are laws in place that say that an employer cannot interfere with your ability to take this leave.
Okay.
So for you or for whomever you're serving, if they worked in Washington, for Washington, your employment is localized in Washington, this is an entitlement that you pay into as an employee of Washington.
Okay.
So, and we'll talk about that calculation here in a minute. I won't make you do math, but I would say about supplemental benefits, there are several employers that allow you to use your accrued PTO to make you whole
Right.
while using these benefits.
I got that.
So you'll want to ask them, if you're not a state worker, like I just said to everybody else, you'll want to ask them if you don't work for the state, whether or not they'll make you whole. So,
May I add something?
sure.
So many of the state agencies actually have a leave code that says like PFML, supplemental benefit. So you put that on your time card, and then you know that that's a supplemental benefit, and you'll be receiving both your regular paid family medical leave as well as whatever PTO that you're utilizing as a supplemental benefit.
Oh, absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, some employers use accrued PTO, some employers use short-term disability plans, some just pay them outright their wages. I've had conversations with employers that say, you know, we don't want to carry a balance of PTO. So we'll let them use it no matter how much they use, along with paid family medical leave. So the best you can do is ask your employer. If they don't, you'll get up to 90% of your wage replacement depending on your earnings. So who is this apply to? We have a law in the program that's called localization. We call it localizations, like unemployment insurance. It really depends on where you work. If you work primarily in Washington, if you work 100% in Washington, you're reportable to Washington. If you work some in Washington, but you say your employer is in Oregon and you work in Oregon, you might be reportable to Oregon. So those kinds of things, you might want to ask your employer if you have multiple states that you work at, where they report you to. It is the employer's obligation to report you and to decide where you're localized. If you're working in Washington 100%, you should always be localized in Washington. So, as I mentioned earlier, who it's not for, we can't compel the federal government to pay premiums on your behalf. So if you're a federal employee, it doesn't apply to you, and I'm so sorry. We also ask tribal entities to participate, but we cannot compel them to participate either. So they can elect to have their employees covered by the paid family medical leave program. I think they're waiting and watching. We haven't had one yet to say, hey, we want to participate in Washington paid family medical leave, but we still have conversations with them regularly. Self-employed individuals can elect to participate and pay and report on themselves. So if you have veterans out there that are self-employed and they want to take advantage of our benefit, they can certainly do so. And then, as I mentioned earlier, some employers have voluntary plans. Now, voluntary plan employers specifically, they are still required to report your wages to the state, because what happens when you leave that voluntary plan employer? Then you're automatically covered by the state. So no matter how long you worked for that voluntary plan employer and never paid a dime in PFML premiums, if you stop working for that voluntary plan employer, you're automatically covered by the state. So,
What about a personal voluntary plan such as AFLAC?
you have to have applied your voluntary plan with the state as an employer. So an employer can say, I want to run my own paid family medical leave program. Many employers actually had short-term disability plans that they wanted to apply, but it has to be equal to or better than the Washington state would provide. So they have to provide you with what we would in order to be approved voluntary plan. So AFLAC wouldn't necessarily cover it unless AFLAC covered everything that we would. So. Good questions. So what is the employer role in all of this? The employer will collect premiums from wages. They will report and pay your wages to the department on a quarterly basis. And then they will they're obligated to notify employees who experience a need for the leave that, hey, you're bringing a child home to foster, you would be eligible for this. You know, or you're going out on surgery, you might be eligible for this. So, go ahead, Ish.
Can an employer choose to pay the premiums for their workers?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, we just talk to employer.
There are actually several employers that won't deduct premiums from an employee wages. They considered it as part of their total package benefit. And I mean, we haven't gone over 1%, but our premium rates are probably, people probably don't notice them significantly coming from their paychecks. We used to get a lot of complaints prior to premium collection, but after premium collection, people were like, okay, it's not too bad.
So it's under 1%?
It is.
Okay.
I keep knocking on Oregon. Oregon rolled out their program at 1% premium collection, but they also have a lower threshold of eligible beneficiaries. So since we're talking about premiums, I told you there's calculations and I would make you do math here. So we also will only collect up to the Social Security cap. So this year, the Social Security cap is $168,600. We won't collect more premiums over the assessed wages.